This is update for June 25, 2022, day 122 of the war, end of the date update. So as always, we're going to start with general and strategic news, and then we're going to switch to the walk through the front line. So first of all, news from Belarus, which is neighboring country straight north of Ukraine, and that country is essentially part of Russia. It's Russia and Belarus is essentially two sides of the same coin, right? So, Russian president announced that they're gonna transfer rocket launcher Iskander M to Belarus, which with the nuclear warheads, which what this really means that Belarus now will have nuclear weapons on its territory. Now let's move. We're gonna move a little bit slightly north to the Belarus neighbor country called Lithuania. We discussed about the corridor and the blockage of that corridor. So let's just remind how it all played out. So Lithuania announced that they're not gonna pass Russian goods to Kaliningrad, which is Russian territory that's separated from mainland Russia. And then, after Russian sort of infuriation and threats and everything, European Union backed out and said, "Okay, fine, we're gonna make exception, we're gonna give waiver, and Russia can transport its goods through Lithuania to Kaliningrad." Okay, so now there is a new twist to this, new sort of turn of this story. Lithuanian president said that they're not going to allow this corridor through Lithuania. So basically, they said that they're not going to allow Russian goods and supplies to go through Lithuania to Kaliningrad. So this is where it stands right now, this situation. We actually found a very interesting historical parallel also for almost the same area that existed before World War II. Right, actually, that's how the World War II sort of formally started. It's not because why it started, but this was, let's say, casus belli or excuse to start the war for Germany in 1939. So there was almost in the same area. There was a city, German city at that time called Danzig, and it was separated from mainland Germany by Polish corridor that was sort of going to the Baltic Sea. So Germany asked unconditional passage of its goods and everything to Danzig. So as if that Polish territory was essentially kind of like a German, so they can transport whatever they want, whenever they want, at any point in time. So Poland refused to do that, and shortly thereafter, there was September 1st, start of the World War II. So it's unfortunately this is very negative parallel, but that's sort of, if we look back into history, this is what happened in the past. Then let's move. There's another news in Russia. So the founder of the Wagner group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who is the sort of one of the person in close circle of Vladimir Putin. So he was awarded Gold Star Medal, which means that he is a hero of Russia for their sort of actions of the Wagner group in Ukraine. And in related news, it looks like Wagner group is actually split into 4 groups that operate in Ukraine. We don't know exactly how they sort of inner structure of that. All we know that they are sort of formally split into 4 groups. They can be all together, just simply just for better sort of management, a command split into 4 groups, or it's possible that they're also being used somewhere else. But all of this, all we know at this point, they split into 4 command groups. and they actually also have aircraft, like military, like regular military aircraft as well. And they also have anti-aircraft systems, not like man-held. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking like sort of full scale, full capability anti-aircraft system. So just to defend against rockets, aircrafts, everything. So they becoming kind of like a you know army within the army in a way, some kind of like like elite army within sort of general Russian army. That in many ways it forces us to think in parallels of World War II. So this is sort of like a regular German army, and then there was SS, right? So in many ways, this is kind of the whole approach is very similar. Versus the Wagner group is essentially equivalent of SS, and regular Russian army is just regular German army at that time. So that's on that topic. Then the Ukrainian army. We mentioned that Ukraine received a bunch of HIMARS rocket launchers from the US so far. Ukraine has not received from the UK and from Germany yet. We believe Ukraine has at this point about 12 M142 launchers, which is wheeled launchers. So they were used first time today, and so they were actually used against some Russian target. But what we saw, basically what was attacked, is simply a bunch of trucks, supply trucks, and pontoon bridges, which is this is not this is not what how they supposed to be used. We discussed yesterday that the the prime target should be Russian artillery batteries, like Russian rocket launchers. All of that creates problem for Ukrainian infantry and its ability to defend, to hold the line. And instead, what we're seeing is Ukrainian army trying to attack just a lot, like basically kind of like create a show, right? Propaganda picture. Here we destroyed bunch of Russian army automobiles, trucks, all of that supply, but it really doesn't change the situation on on the battlefield. And that's what we were saying, that there is no strategy. Just okay, we see that juice, what we think is a juicy target, let's hit it, right? We're gonna have beautiful picture on TV, wonderful, but it really doesn't solve the underlying problem. There's no strategy in terms of systematically destroying Russian long range artillery, which is what creating sort of problem in the first place, or what needs to be knocked out first in order to be able to sort of neutralize Russian artillery over the long run in general, not only long range, but sort of medium range as well. So again, there is no systematic approach, no strategy, and that's where the problem lies within the Ukrainian army. Unfortunately, we have to sort of say what it is, because if things don't change, this launchers will not will not make a difference, right? And not to mention that Russia has Soviet Union had equivalent launchers. They're not as precise. That's their sort of big disadvantage. But they were not made to be used in sort of precise ways. They just the way as all of the Soviet artillery and rocket troops, they were all made as sort of you saturate the area with the rockets or with artillery shells, right? So that's how you sort of knock out the enemy, not by sort of precision strike, but by the quantity. Again, this is the same approach, right? So Russian approach is always quantity. That's not about quality, it's about large quantity. So here is the same approach, right? So now let's last general news is that Ukraine and Moldova agreed to repair a railroad that connects two countries, which will allow them to transport Ukrainian grain through Moldova to Romania to Romanian ports on the Black Sea. That makes it so the whole problem with you know export of Ukrainian grain is that everything that's using, let's say, trucks or long distance railroad makes it extremely expensive, so it's not competitive on the world market, and that's what was the problem, and that's why Ukrainian seaports were so vital, because the railroad leg is relatively short. So let's say it's from all of this area, right? So that's, all of Ukraine has grain, but essentially this is, all of the south of Ukraine, essentially all of this like central south, part of the north, not as like much north here, and a little bit of the west. All of it is grain producing areas. So if you use railroad, it's not that long distance, and also in Ukraine there were special rates for all of that. So essentially, that made export of grain competitive. So if you actually try to transport through Poland, that makes it prohibitively expensive. So the grain is becoming, made out of gold, so nobody will buy it. So the only option, and which is correct and reasonable option, is to basically do the same railroad transportation, essentially the same distance through Moldova and then through Romania to Romanian seaports on Black Sea here, which is not far away. So that makes somewhat viable export of grain from Ukraine. So that repair will take some time, and it's expected that this railroad start operation sometime early September. So that's it for general news. Now let's do walks through the front line in a clockwise fashion, starting from the very north. As always, there is exchange of artillery fire, mortar fire, basically exchange of hits from both sides along the state border. Now let's move a little bit south. Let's see what's going on east of Kharkiv. Situation here is more or less the same. Again, there are some reports of Russian pressure in this area. Russian troops are saying the objective is to capture this Stary Saltiv here, but so far it's still in Ukrainian hands. Now let's move again south. Let's look what's going on at the Izyum bridgehead. So Russian troops launched several attacks in our typical sort of locations is Dolyna, Kransopillya, Bogorodychne. There's a tiny village here, essentially kind of almost abandoned. So essentially, like along this where this arrow is, this is direction of the another attack. So typical direction. The objective is obviously to get to Slavyansk, right? That's what they're trying to do right now. So it seems like this uh, potentially more difficult path, but potentially more rewarding if it's successful through Barvinkova looks like it has been abandoned for more or less from what based on sort of activity of Russian troops here. Now let's move to Lysychansk area, or Lysychansk, because it's not Severodonetsk was Ukrainian troops retreated from Severodonetsk, so I guess it's not going to be correct to call it Severodonetsk salient. So at this point, let's call it Lysychansk salient, which is a large city. It's the same size as Severodonetsk. I think both cities were about close to 100,000, Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, and then Rubizhne was around 60. So it was quite, this was quite populated area. So it's close to 300,000 people. Obviously, before the war, there's no 300,000 people at this point in this whole area, and it's just generally a relatively populated area. Donbass is, which is Luhansk and Donetsk region. It's called its short name is Donbass, and it's generally a densely populated area. So Russian troops, after Ukrainian the Russian troops are attacking straight sort of south of Lysychansk. Basically, the fighting is happening on outskirts of Lysychansk. This is the major sort of direction of the attack right now. Let's actually, so this is generally the front line here. The attacks are happening here. This is abandoned industrial facility here. I think it's some kind of rubber manufacturing. Used to manufacture some rubber products here, and there is another one that's some food industry plant here. So this is where the attacks are. So let's actually look. So this is one industrial site here where this they made some rubber products here, and then there's smaller one which is some food processing facility here. So this so the fighting is actually going on right now at both in both areas, industrial areas. So far, Russian troops were stopped somewhere there. We don't know if Ukrainian troops able to mount some kind of counterattack to sort of drive Russian troops back and sort of reestablish the regional front line. So we'll see how it all goes, but so far they already started making new gains here. Now let's go a little bit south. Let's look let's look what's going on in the southern section of this big Popasna salient, we can call it. So the focus was today this village Pokrovske. So there was attack from sort of southeastern direction and then from northeastern direction, for both from two directions at the same time, directed at Pokrovske. So I think this is the sort of another focus, another short-term objective for Russian troops here. In addition, there was again attempts by Wagner mercenaries to sort of expand this little salient here in the direction of the Vershina, Zaitseve. So basically, the focus is to get to this town Bakhmut. That's next intermediate objective for the Russian troops in the southern section of the Popasna salient, basically. And then obviously they're trying to close this and sort of and create at least tiny pocket. This is probably more for propaganda purposes more than anything, but nevertheless they still try to do that. This is just a little bit sort of another view from OpenStreetMaps, which kind of a little bit in some ways it's better, in some ways it's worse, but we use both to have all angles of the situation. So this is where this fighting in Klinove, and then the another axis of attack is there is a tiny village here, like kind of like abandoned village Vershina, and then Zaitseve, and then the goal is this Bakhmut here essentially. So now let's move a little bit south. Let's see what's going on west of Donetsk. Situation here got a little bit more active. So Russian troops renewed their attacks in their typical places. So they attacked towards New York. They attacked here, sort of like towards southwest, basically trying to encircle Avdiyivka, Ukrainian troops in Avdiyivka, and force withdrawal from this area, and then towards Maryinka, right? So all typical areas: Avdiyivka, New York, Maryinka. So all typical attacks without any success so far. Now let's look what's going on at the Zaporizhia front line. Situation here is still frozen, on hold, nothing major, just artillery shelling. No news, no essential news here. Now let's jump to the Kherson bridgehead. So again, the situation here is very similar. No changes. Everything's on frozen, on hold. Artillery shelling, reconnaissance action. So essentially, no changes here. Again, we just hear some Ukrainian propaganda that Ukrainian troops are getting towards Kherson. Nothing like that is happening. Everything here is positional. So it's sort of kind of like World War One. There's no progress by Ukrainian troops. They don't have any resources to make any progress in this area anywhere here. The same goes true for the Russian troops. They don't have resources to continue attacks towards Mykolaiv and Kryvyi Rih, because these two cities are sort of immediate objective if, let's say, Russian troops will have got resources to continue attacks here. So these two places, these are large cities, especially Kryvyi Rih is very important. It's really industrial, one of the sort of main parts of Ukrainian industrial heart, along with Zaporizhia and Dnipro. That's remaining in Ukrainian hands. So that will be very extremely important place here. And Mykolaiv is important because it's a seaports, right? So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow. Bye bye.